right, we're going to get started. So, hello and welcome to today's Grow session entitled Holy Humor with Dr. Rafa Kearns. My name's Laura Tarlin, and I am one of the Program and Relationship Directors on the Tamid of Hebrew College team, and I'm thrilled to be here today for a second Grow of the session, of the year, actually, of 2025-26. Grow sessions are designed to be opportunities for participants to gather, reflect, observe, and wrestle with important topics relevant to our lives today through a Jewish lens. So we're lucky because today our topic is about humor, the unique Jewish sense of humor. And so I think this is we all need a little humor in our lives right now. So this is great. Let me introduce our speaker and then we'll get started. Rafa Kearns is an Ashkenazi cisgender queer Jew from Brazil who currently lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota, much to his surprise. He grew up in a culturally Jewish family that wasn't very interested in much of anything religious. In high school, he was a devout atheist and saw religion primarily as a photo for his artistic, mostly theatrical explorations. In college, he became less arrogant and decided he couldn't know about God and realized it would be more generative to ask not whether God exists, but how to live. That was his inroad into Jewish learning and remains the question that drives his engagement with Jewish text tradition. And he believes that Judaism and especially Jewish practices for text study can help people find belongings and much needed guidance, inspiration, and meaning in today's world. He holds a PhD in education and Jewish studies from Stanford University, an MA in instructional technology and media from Columbia University Teachers College, and a BA in theater studies from Yale. He's the founder and chief education officer of the House of Inquiry and Imagine, which seeks to help build meaningful relationships and diverse community through the study of culturally significant texts. So please feel free, Rafa, to start. And if you have any questions at the beginning, please put them in the chat. And then I think Rafa will be opening it up for more questions. So here we go.
Great. Hi, folks. Thank you, Laura, for the introduction. I am Rafa Kern. Please call me Rafa. Today's topic is humor. This is both the standalone session and also the introduction to a taste teaser of a longer 5-course or 5-session class that I'm teaching through Tamid of Hebrew College. And the whole class is called Holy Humor. It's about what is funny and what do funny things do for us. And it's both sort of like an intellectual exploration of that question and hopefully also an embodied practical, like, how do we get to be a little bit more funny? So I figured that for this session, we would start at the beginning. We would start with the first joke in the Torah, the first time that people laugh in the Torah, which is the naming of Isaac. Unfortunately, it's not that funny. So I thought but it did remind me of a joke, which, maybe you've heard before. But there's this guy. His name is Shloimeh. There's 2 things you need to know about Shloimeh. Shloimeh loved to tell jokes, and also Shloimeh was a Holocaust survivor. And so Shloimeh died because he was old, and went up and got to meet God. And so because Shloimeh liked to tell jokes, Shloimeh was like, okay, I'm going to tell a joke. And he started telling this joke, and it turned out to be a Holocaust joke. And he was telling it, and he got to the punchline, and he was really looking expectantly at God. And God said, that's not funny. And Shloimeh said, well, I guess you had to be there. And in a similar way, I think the story of Isaac is a sort of like, maybe it's funny, but maybe you have to be there. So let's see what we can make out of this story. The way this is going to go is I'm going to present a puzzle, there's a question that I have that's in the text, and that's going to take a little bit of time. And then I'm hoping that you'll tell me the answer because I don't know. So this is an interactive conversation situation. So please gird your loins and prepare yourselves to think with me. Oh, wrong button. One of the inspiring quotes or inspirational quotes for me with regard to this class is this quote from Kierkegaard, who is a 19th century Danish philosopher and novelist and mystic and whatever. But he says, humor is the last stage of existential awareness before faith. I'm curious about the relationship between humor and faith. I think that's at the core of this session in particular, but at the entire course more broadly. So let's start with the word Isaac, Yitzchak. The root of the word Isaac is tzchok, or tzachak. There's a lot of words in the slide. We're not going to deal with all of them. There's some of them that are really confusing. There's some of them that are in scripts that I don't even know the name of. We're going to focus on the stuff that's in italics. So, verb, laugh, 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 laugh at, laugh concerning, laugh about, jest, sport, play, make sport, toy with, make a toy of, laughter. These are the various different meanings that we're holding on to with the Hebrew word tzchok. That's the word that we can keep coming back to, is what is this word and what does it mean? What is it doing for us? So it's doing all of these things. It's sort of like network of associations that the word in the academy is the semantic field, sort of like all of the things that make up the definition of this word tzchok, according to the Brown Driver Briggs dictionary, which is sort of a go-to biblical Hebrew dictionary. These are the things that are in the stew. So now let's look at how it shows up in the story of Isaac's birth. God said to Abraham, "As for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, for Sarah/princess is her name. I will bless her, and I will give you a son from her. I will bless her so that she becomes nations. Kings of people shall come from her." But Avram flung himself on his face and laughed, and said in his heart, "To 100-year-old man shall there be children born? Or shall 90-year-old Sarah give birth?" A note, all the English translations in this presentation are from Everett Fox's translation. It's a little bit weirder than other translations. It's part of why I like it. It does it captures some of the weirdness of the Hebrew. So we're going to zoom in really to this part that's here in bold. But Abraham flung himself on his face and laughed and said in his heart. What is happening to Abraham when he flings himself on his face and laughs internally? What's that? And what does that have to tell us about what's funny? And about what humor does in this context and could do for us? Hold this question. In the same conversation, after this exchange, God tells Abraham to circumcise himself and all of his people. So he does that. And while he's recovering, he's like sitting on the tent, presumably in significant pain. And three visitors come and say, "Hey, they are angels." And Abraham goes out of his way to be really hospitable. He runs around and gets them food and milk and all kinds of things, milk and meat, notably. Which is a different conversation we're not going to have. And then the angels or the messengers talk to him, and they ask about Sarah. Oh, they said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" And he said, "Here in the tent." Now he said, God said, or the messenger said, "I will return. Yes, return to you when time revives, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son." Now, Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. And Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in days. The path of women had ceased for Sarah. Sarah laughed within herself, saying, "After I have become worn, is there to be pleasure for me? And my Lord is old." So again, we're going to zoom in and pay attention to the laughing. Sarah overhears this presumably good news. She's been trying to have a kid for 90 years, or not quite 90, 70 years, let's say. And she hears from this messenger that she's going to have a kid. And her response is to laugh. She laughs within herself. V'titzchak Sarah bekirba. That will potentially come in handy. Um, and the word and the conversation here is similar to Abraham. Abraham falls on his face and laughs in his heart. Um, Sarah Sarah laughs inside herself. So we're continuing to hold what is happening when they laugh. One more example of the way that this word shows up in the story. Let me go back for a second. God asks, after this conversation, God asks why Sarah laughs. She says, I didn't laugh. The Torah says that that was because she was afraid. She didn't say that she laughed because she was afraid. And then the men leave. So the messengers leave. Then Abraham and God have a conversation about Sodom and Gomorrah. That happens. Sodom and Gomorrah. Then Abraham ends up in Gerar, where he pretends that Sarah is his sister, and she becomes the wife of Avimelech. All of this stuff happens. A year passes, and then Sarah has Isaac. And then Sarah laughs again. Now Abraham was 100 years old when Yitzchak / he laughs, his son, was born to him. Now Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. All who hear of it will laugh for me. And she said, who would have declared to Abraham, Sarah will nurse sons? Well, I have borne him a son in his old age. So once again, we're looking at the laughing. Sarah said out loud, presumably, God has made laughter for me, and all who hear of it will laugh for me. So we have these three instances of laughing. We have Abraham, we have the first Sarah, and we have the second Sarah. In Hebrew, they're all the same word. So we're sort of the same thing that's happening. And now we're going to look at some translations and see, and that might help us think about maybe they're not the same. Maybe they're actually different. Maybe there's something that makes Sarah different from Abraham, and maybe there's something that makes the first time that Sarah laughs different from the second time that Sarah laughs. So we're going to be looking at the first translations of the Hebrew Bible, which are into Aramaic, which is, a really dead language, but a super helpful way to think about what's happening in these stories and what's happening contextually in them. So we're going to be looking at two different Targumim, two different of these translations to Aramaic. We're going to be looking at the Targum Jonathan, and the Targum Onkelos, which we'll come back to in a second. But one of the things that translations do is that all translations are commentaries. They all take the semantic field from one language and shift it into another language. So it's like, oh, I'm going to translate, I don't know, the word surprise into Portuguese, which is my native language. All of a sudden, that has a number of different associations. It's not quite the same. It doesn't quite overlap in the same way. You can't get a one-to-one match between one language and another. And when the translators into Aramaic are choosing what words to bring, they are choosing slightly different words, and those words give us an insight into what they think is going on. So the word that Jonathan brings for all three instances, so he's keeping the fact that in Hebrew it's all the same, and the word he brings is tama. And this, I think, gives us a sense of what's happening with the laughing. We're going to look now at the dictionary version of tama. Tama means to stand still, to be astonished, amazed, to wonder, to be undecided, and to be confused. So what Jonathan is saying in his translation is that their laughter arises from a place of astonishment and wonder. They're like, whoa, that happened? That's wild. It's that kind of laughter. It's the laughter of like, wow, my world has been blown open and it's now something totally different and unexpected. That's one version of laughter that could be happening here. The other Targum that we're going to look at is the Targum Onkelos, and he gives different translations, which gives us different insights into what's happening potentially in these texts. So in the first, in Abraham's case and in Sarah's second appearance, he gives the word chada, which is chet daled aleph. We'll look at this in a second. And for the second Sarah, or sorry, for the first Sarah, we get chet vav chaf. The important thing to note from here is those are different. We don't know yet what the difference is, unless you are fluent in Aramaic, in which case I commend you. But we know that they're different. We know that Abraham and Sarah 2 are different from Sarah 1. Why? So we're going to first look at Sarah 2. In Sarah 2's case, which is she overheard the guy say she's going to have a kid, and she laughs within herself and says, that's not happening. The word means to rub or scratch, to hawk, to laugh, to jest with or caress, to laugh at, laughter, gladness. I apologize. 1 second. No, that is correct. Sorry. And object of derision. Yeah. There is something in this laughter that is a little bit uncomfortable, right? There's something about rubbing and scratching, like hawking. There's jesting, like poking fun of. There's an object of, like, being the object of derision is here. There's a sense of like irony or scorn, I think, in this laughter. And I'm gonna soon ask you why. The second, so Sarah 2 and Abraham have this other root, chet daled aleph or chet daled yud. This one means to be glad or merry, to be bright, glad, rejoice, to be bright, clean, glossy, to be merry or noisy. And then from some related roots, from chet daled daled, to be sharp or pointed, to whet the mind, to puzzle. And here there's some echoes back to that sense of tama, of surprise, of astonishment, of wonder, the sense of like, oh, that's something is weird for me here. And from aleph chet daled, echad, one singular particular. So there's something in this other translation that is the translation that Onkelos brings for Abraham and also for Sarah once she has Isaac, that feels a little bit, I mean, brighter, cleaner. It doesn't have the like scratchiness of rubbing, of chachach, of choch, which is the previous word. So the question is, why? So we're going to look at Abraham first, and now this is the part where we talk to each other. I invite you to, how am I going to make this happen? Great. I invite you to raise your hands digitally or visually if you have things to say. But let's think together a little bit about what's going on in Abraham's story, such that his laughter is both a laughter of wonder and surprise, and a laughter that is bright and glossy and merry. Any thoughts?
Well, perhaps Avram should have said to God, "You gotta be kidding."
What, say more, Barry. What do you mean by that?
I mean, how much more can I say? He hears a voice, it tells him that he's an old guy, excuse the expression, he can't get it up. His wife is an old lady, and he's told that his wife is going to become pregnant. What's he going to say? What is this, God? An immaculate conception?
So what you're pointing to is there's something about this that's totally unbelievable. So God comes to Abraham and says, "You're gonna have a kid." And Abraham is like, "No, I'm not. Are you nuts? That's totally unbelievable." And from that place, there's some laughter that arises. Is that about right, Barry?
Well, yeah, I mean, except for the fact that his name went out of fame, Bill Cosby would have done a great number with this as well as his Noah routine. Can you imagine him doing an Abraham routine?
Um, any other thoughts about what's happening with Abraham here? Randy, what you got?
Well, he's dumbfounded, but I don't pick up that he's afraid, as we see in Sarah. And maybe the fear is the scratchy version, and this is the bright and
Uh,
dumbfounded, but kind of bright but puzzled version.
uh, yeah, I love that. Um, and there's something about this flinging himself on his face that feels related to this question of like, is he afraid? Like, what's happening in his body, right? Like, he's laughing, he's ha-ha-haing. Um, yeah. So there's a difference in the amount of fear that Sarah has maybe more fear than Abraham does. And that changes the way that she relates to this surprise. Any more thoughts about Abraham? Or about echoes in your own lives?
I think that one thing is that well, there was Ishmael, but Abraham hasn't really, he's gone through all of his life. God has given him like so many tests, and the tests are kind of brutal. There's war, and there's in the fiery furnace, and there's all these things. So not having really been a parent before, he thinks, oh, having a baby is great by comparison. This is a test. What kind of a test is this? This is a fabulous thing. This is like so totally different from brutal tests. He doesn't realize, of course, that when you're a parent, yeah, it is a test, but at the newness of it all, it's just very, very different from all the other tests God has been putting him through.
So you're saying that there's some sense of like, wow, it's surprising, and this surprise feels better than the other surprises you've given me, God.
Yeah.
And so there's some hope. There's like a surprise and a sense of hope, which is related, I think, to what Randy was saying about fear, right? Hope, if hope is the opposite of fear. So Abraham is looking at this and being like, oh, this is great. And Sarah's like looking at this from a different place. And we'll come to Sarah in a second. Before we come to Sarah, some other people have thoughts about what's going on here, namely some commentators. So the way that the commentators are working is they're picking up on these questions, the question of like, what is this laughter that's happening here? And they're offering responses. And their responses are just as made up as ours. And just as rooted in their life experience as ours, and just as rooted in their relationship with everything that they've ever read and heard and thought as ours. They've maybe read more Torah than we have, but we've read lots of other stuff. So again, I apologize for the number of words per slide, but I didn't make a source sheet. I made this deck so we could all be on the same page. Rashi, who's a 12th century 12th century French commentator, apologies, comments, and Abraham fell upon his face and laughed. This word, vayitzchak, Onkelos translates by v'chadi, which signifies joy, quote, and he rejoiced. But the similar verb in the case of Sarah, v'titzchak, Genesis 18:12, which is our case, he translates as meaning laughter, like derisive laughter. From this, you may understand that Abraham had faith and rejoiced. and that Sarah had no faith and sneered. And that is why God was angry with Sarah when she laughed, but was not angry with Abraham. So this is along the lines of what Randy and Amy are pointing to, that there's something about faith, and goes back also to the Kierkegaard quote that we opened up with. There's something about like the relationship between humor and faith, that when there is faith, there can be more humor, and the humor has a different tone to it. It's not sneering, it's joy. And I would point out that Rashi is also noticing that when Sarah laughs, God's like, you shouldn't be laughing. And when Abraham laughs, God doesn't say anything, which is also weird. So Rashi's like, this word is weird, this response is weird, what's going on? This is his answer. Samson Raphael Hirsch is a 19th century German commentator who wrote in German. So this is Google translated. Thank you, Google Translate. It has been thought that Vaitzchak must be taken as an expression of joy. So he's responding in part to Rashi. However, the consistent meaning of tzachak in the Tanakh, in the Hebrew Bible, does not allow for this interpretation at all. Even schok, which is a related word that Hirsch will bring back later, is not really an expression of joy, but laughter, and predominantly a mocking, disparaging laugh, or joke, play, not really joy. But tzachak is without exception an ironic laugh, a laugh that carries within it a certain negation, a condemnation of the object that provokes the laughter. As here of Abraham, in the following chapter, it is said of Sarah in exactly the same way, Sarah v'titzchak Sarah. And this was certainly not an expression of joy. Otherwise, she would not have denied it, and she would not have been reproached. Samson Raphael Hirsch is pointing out that when Sarah has this, it's the same word, so presumably it's the same thing. And there is the sense of mocking. There's the sense of derision. There's the sense, as Barry brought, of like disbelief. And I think also a sense of like self-protective, I don't believe you. I think you're toying with me. That kind of laughter that's happening here. Any thoughts about what the commentators have to say before we turn to Sarah? Stan.
Oh, this is an offshoot question. I think that the commentators perhaps should have taken a look at the relative ages of the principles, meaning and figured out as to whether the ages were calculated on ancient calculations or on something more modern that might be more credible.
So you're wondering if part of what's going on is that they're saying that Abraham was 90, but 90 in that context means something different than it does for us. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Got it. And what would that do to their laughter, do you think?
Well, certainly somebody who is let's say 60 and 40 or whatever would still be an issue, because even back years ago, people, women didn't have children past a certain age, so it still might be an interesting issue medically, regardless, but it might be less of a quote unquote miracle, but still have some humorous effects to it.
Yeah, I think that there's still something funny about it. And there's funny in this way that it's like, it's surprising, it's jarring, it does something to our expectations that isn't what we expected. Which is the dominant theory of humor in contemporary philosophy and psychology, that it has to do with incongruity. It has to do with like we have expectations and then they're broken. And if you join for the course, we'll dive more into that. But for now, let's go back to Sarah and see what's going on for her. So again, the translation here was that one that had a sense of scratching and rubbing and derision, which is what Samson Rav Hirsch, was saying, said about Abraham in the previous comments. But what is different, do we think, if anything, in Sarah's laughter than Abraham's? And Amy brought a sense of fear previously.
She's got to go through childbirth. That's no laughing matter.
That
No
is,
matter how old or which age, that's a big deal.
yeah.
A lot more than what Abraham's going to have to go through. I mean, initially, he's going to get um, wrapped up in a lot of heavy stuff too, but appropriately.
Right. Yeah, the sense of like after I have become worn, right? That she's worn down and it's gonna be really hard. Um, although it does say, is there to be pleasure for me? There's the sense that like something about this is gonna be nice. The word here for pleasure it comes from the word for Eden. There are actually other translations and other interpretations that read this not as having to do with pleasure, but actually as having to do with some sort of skin disease. In which case, your interpretation would be even more on point, Marty. Other comments about what's happening with Sarah? All right, let's look what some other folks had to say about it. Again, looking at a bunch of commentators, some of them are repeats, most of them are not. Rashi, 12th century France, this time it's correct, notes less about laughing, but more about bikirba. So Abraham spoke into his heart, belibo, and Sarah laughs bikirba, within herself, or regarding her inside. It's a different translation of the same phrase. She reflected on her physical condition, saying, is it possible that this womb shall bear a child, that these dried up breasts shall give forth milk? Which is, I think, akin to what Marty was saying. And Rashi is bringing it from a different source, from the Midrash, a Midrash. Ibn Ezra, 12th century Spain, responds to the same question, which is what is Bikirba and why is it different from Belibo? And says, it's not what Rashi's saying, it's in her mind. She's just thinking about it. She's laughing to herself. Sforno, who's a 16th century Italian commentator, on the laughter itself, says she assumed that the words of the angel were merely a blessing, not a prophecy, as occurred with the prophet Elisha. I believe that when such a blessing is given to old people, people who would require a miracle for the blessing to come true, it would not be effective in her case. She considered the kind of rejuvenation required for her to bear a child as equivalent to reviving the dead. Such an act, in her opinion, required God's personal attention, not merely that of a prophet. At the very least, it would come about in answer to a prayer. So Sforno is saying, there's something about this that's utterly unbelievable, and Sarah doesn't want to believe it. It's scary, not because of childbirth, but because she really wants it to happen. And if she really wants it to happen and somebody says it's going to happen, she's surprised, but she's not going to let herself be taken by this surprise, because that would be really painful. Torah, a women's commentary, goes back to the question of Bekirba and says, Sarah, alone in the tent, responds with no outward sign. Abraham fell on his face, laughing out loud, while he was in conversation with the deity. Sarah was quiet. It was her experience and her experience alone. Thoughts about this first Sarah encounter? Any thoughts? All right, onwards we go. So we're holding here that there's something about the first time that Sarah encounters this prophecy. I find Sforno to be really, really compelling. I think that there is something for me when somebody's like, oh, you're for sure gonna get that job, or you're for sure gonna do whatever, and I'm like, I don't know about that. It's terrifying. I'm like, I wish I believed you, but I don't. Or I'm scared to, right? There's that fear again. And there is often a laughter with that fear. There's like a dismissive, derisive laughter. And I think everybody's pointing to Rashi, Ibn Ezra, and the women's commentary are all pointing to the fact that this is an internal experience, whether it's about her internal experience or it's just in her mind. It's happening inside her. All right. We're going to move a little bit more quickly through this one.
There is one other thing, and that's her history. That when she says, after I'm worn, she's slept with Abraham from the place of her birth. They've slept from Ur Kasdim. They've traveled. They've gone places. He's been to war. He had the bris between the pieces. He was promised a family, so she wasn't having kids. So she's already given Hagar to him, and he's had a child, and and she's jealous and the whole thing. And then so now it's like, after all of this, now you're making me a promise. Now, after I've been through all of that, and that's she doesn't want to say anything, because the last time she said something was, "Here, Abraham, take my servant," and that didn't turn out so great. So she's afraid to say anything, but she's certainly thinking it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's the fear of speaking up and it being, again, dismissed. So now we're moving to Sarah's second encounter, in which
online at route120honda.com, where the customer always goes first.
Onkelos translated it as like Abraham's is sort of like pure, bright, glossy joy. Once Sarah has had Isaac. So God has made laughter for me. All who hear of it will laugh for me. And the prepositions sound weird in English, but they are meant to echo the Hebrew. Again, this is Everett Fox's translation, which I highly recommend. Certainly my favorite of the 5 books of Moses. All right, some commentaries that'll help us think a little bit more about this stuff. Rashi says, he will laugh to me. He will be happy to me, for me. The Midrash Haggadah says, many barren women were remembered with her. Many sick were healed on that day. Many prayers were answered with her, and much laughter was in the world. So there's something about this that isn't contrary to Sarah's first experience, which was bikirba. It was very internal. There's something about this, says the Midrash and says Rashi, that is actually really explosively external. It's like, this joy is abundant. It overflows. Radak, who's a 13th century Provençal, or from Provence, commentator, says, she said that she really called the boy Yitzchak in order to give expression to the joy that God had granted. She was convinced that everyone hearing about her good fortune of having given birth in her old age would share her joy at this. Any person being surprised by some unexpected happy event laughs for joy. And the Torah Woman's Commentary also picks this up. All who hear will laugh with me. Sarah responds to maternity with laughter. Earlier, the laughter was private. Now, it embraces everyone else. And before we read the Bechor Shor, before I read the Bechor Shor, I'm curious if people have thoughts on Sarah's explosive outpouring of joy. I'm wondering if it has to do with the fact that she didn't believe at first. And then it happened. And so the surprise was even greater because she didn't believe and she didn't want to believe. And there is this great relief of it being so. Randy, you had your hand up.
What I was about to say was, I think you pretty much summed it up, that she went from, in the first case, hearing it as a prophecy that, may not come to fruition, and then in the second case, she's had the baby. She can take it from inward to outward, to the community, to God, to the world, because it's happened, and she's, outwardly joyful.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yes, Audrey. Oh, sorry, you're muted. I think I have to unmute you. Nope, you have to unmute yourself.
You're still muted, and you're still muted.
The simplest way to unmute is simply to hold down the space bar and speak.
Go. Okay.
You're
I've discussed, this has interested me all along, and just from going to synagogue every week. And I think she's relieved because she has Hagar with Ishmael hanging over her head. And here she bears a son. She has now a real bona fide son, heir to Abraham and now Isaac. I also feel when she gets rid of Hagar, she gets rid of her because remember when she was saved Abraham from the Pharaoh when they were traveling, and he said, "Pretend you're my sister." So, I mean, I'm just talking to you. I got dropped into your session, okay? So I'm just being, my arrogant self. What should I tell you? I feel when she tells him Hagar's got to go, it's because she remembers back when she had to be a concubine to the Pharaoh. And luckily, she did not conceive, as far as we know, as the Torah tells us. And he hands her back to Abram, and they go merrily on their way. So I think this story is all wound up into a lot of that. I think the laughter is because if someone would tell me at 90, I would get hysterical laughing too. I think it's joyous. I think all of those things. But I think she has this need to perform and produce this air that she gets a lot of relief from.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm gonna mute you again, Andre. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense that there is this like great relief and release. And some of the commentators, I didn't bring them, but some of the other commentators do suggest that the reason that Sarah is afraid is that people will think that she conceived by Avimelech. She didn't conceive by Abraham. She conceived by this other person that maybe that Abraham effectively made her abscond with. The Bechor Shor, who's a 12th century French commentator, says, God has made laughter for me, meaning to say that is why his name is called Yitzchak. People will laugh at me, saying, have you seen Sarah? She gave birth at 90 years and she began now to blah, 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 blah. There's a sense that here this laughter is derisive. There's a sense that even in this moment, according to the Bechor Shor, this isn't this like pure overflowing joy. There's actually something about it that is afraid or is diminutive or is yeah, I don't know. There's something about it that is like this humor is aggressive. If there's a thought about that, I would take it. And if not, I have one last commentator. All right. So we're going back to Rav Hirsch, who is that 19th century German translator or commentator translated via Google. And Hirsch is writing in the 19th century. He's writing during the Jewish Enlightenment, when Jews have recently been granted the possibility of being citizens of the German state, and are trying to figure out what is our role in society. And so Hirsch is the founder of the Orthodox denomination in response to the Reformed denomination, but that's relevant in what he says, which is Yitzchak sounds like a compound of two different grammatical forms. This is a little extra nerdy. Sounds like a compound of two different grammatical forms, Kal and Piel. Doesn't really matter that much. His grammar is actually not correct, but it's still worth thinking about. Tzachak Kal is the natural involuntary laughter we can hardly resist at the sight of something ridiculous. Tzachek in Piel is the voluntary mocking laughter that ridicules the incongruity between intention and action, between will and accomplishment, and etc. So one version of laughter, which is sort of what we've been playing with, one version of laughter is natural, involuntary, at the sight of something ridiculous. It's like, wow, that's absurd. We laugh. The other kind is also picking up on an incongruity, but it's mocking. It's the tension between intention and action, will and accomplishment. There's like a gap there, and it's still funny, but it's an aggressive funny of the gap. It's possible that this ironic side of laughter is already involved here. The world knew the, quote, pretension with which Abraham and Sarah, the sort of like highfalutenness, with which Abraham and Sarah, these two individuals, dared to swim against the tide of time as they were, establishing the Jewish people. Indeed, with which they dared to nurture the hope of one day damming this entire mighty stream and diverting it into another channel, the source of the like power of and inspiration of God into this whole other channel, this entirety of humanity, the entirety of human existence, becoming like having a different relationship with the divine. And now to graft this entire pretension, all of these hopes, already so ridiculous in itself, onto a late, tender shoot, on this little baby that is the baby of an old mom and an old dad, and is weak. One push, and all hope is buried forever in its first beginning. Shall we blame our contemporaries, asks Rav Hirsch in the 19th century, if at the cradle of the Jewish people they did not resist a mocking smile? Since the world historical pretensions of the world historical Jewish people are still, in the 19th century, a laughingstock to those who do not involve God in the calculation of events and the course of time? We were pointed to this position from the outset. The first son of Abraham was called Yitzchak, and will continue to be called so until all hope based solely on God's rule and God's promise are fulfilled. Then, az yimale schok pinu, which is from the Psalms. Then our mouth will be the last. Then our mouth will be the last to laugh, but then our mouth will be filled with laughter. Yitzchak means it or he will laugh, and this laughter, the final laughter, won't be a tzchok. It will be a gentle, a breathy smile of joy. It'll be a schok, which is a slight pun that is doable in Hebrew. And I just love Hirsch's tying up of these two different kinds of laughter and the ways that we respond to the world. Are we responding to the world with ridicule, or responding to it from openness and hope? And like, it is weird. Life is weird. Are we going to mock it because it's weird, or are we going to be amazed that it's weird? That's the question. And Hirsch says, people look at us, the Jews, and say, those people have some hope that it will be something different. And they look at us and laugh, but we will laugh later. And when we laugh collectively, that laughter will be a gentle, breathy smile. It'll be the smile of possibility and delight. And maybe it will overflow and like Rashi's interpretation of Sarah's joy, it will infect all those around us. Folks, that is the end of my time. Thank you so much for coming. If you are interested, please join the series. These are the things we'll be talking about in the rest of the series. So there's a session on Talmudic jokes, a session on the wise men of Chelm, one on Jewish jokes, one on humor and prophecy, and one on clowning. Barry, you have a question.
I have a very quick question. Unfortunately, I missed the very beginning of your program, and I can catch it on tape. Was any mention made by you or anyone else at the beginning of that expression, man trachtum Gott lacht?
No, but it is a very good
So
one.
here's my basic question. Do we have written anywhere in Tanakh or anywhere at all anything about God laughing?
Yes. Come back.
When?
That'll
gonna-
probably be in Talmudic jokes, but sign up for the sessions.
Oh, I will. I was just curious, that's all.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
uh,
it's around.
okay, Abyssinia.
I want to jump in here and just say, Amy, I see that your hand's up, so I'm going to let you ask a question 1 second. But I did really want to say thank you to Hafa for today's grow. I'm so excited that he was able to come, and it was a great session, so thank you. He will be teaching, as he mentioned, a 5-week course called Holy Humor in Theory and Practice, and it's going to start on November 6th at 7:30. I think my colleague Lori is going to be putting it in the chat, but we will also be sending out a recording and more information or all the stuff that I'm about to talk about. The other thing is that our course catalog has so many different programs and courses being offered. So do feel free to peruse that. And lastly, I just want to invite you to our next Grow session on why Jews don't talk about God and why they should. God and Jewish Philosophy with Stephen Kepnes, and that will be Wednesday, November 12th at noon. And again, we will send out information about that. So just thank you and wishing everybody a happy Sukkot, and you know, that everything will go smoothly over the next year. So with that, I want to say thank you. Amy, you can ask a quick question, and then I think Randy does too, but we'll let you ask your questions, and then we will have to close up for the day.
Folks want to leave, please feel free. Amy, what's up? You're muted.
You're muted.
Amy, just hold down the space bar.
Am I
Okay.
unmuted now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I it always bothered me that okay, so we have this child named Yitzchak. What's the reason that after he was weaned and he's playing that Sarah chases away Hagar and Yishmael because Yishmael Yitzchak with Yitzchak. Isn't that a play on the same word?
Absolutely. And
And also later on, we have that when Yitzchak is older and he's also when he goes looking for food he asks Rivka to say you're my sister and not my wife, but then
Yeah.
he looks out and he sees that Yitzchak and Rivka are mitzachek. They're also so it's kind of ironic that it's the same word that's used.
Yeah, I think it's very, I don't know about intentional, but it's very interesting, and in the true sense of the word, it's like fun to think about. And I thought for a long time about whether to include the Ishmael story. And I decided against it because the story of the two kinds of laughter felt more generative for me. But I will say that Rashi, when he responds to that story, is really puzzled by it also, and gives a bunch of different explanations, which is usually a sign that he doesn't like any of them. It's like, oh, maybe it's got to do with idol worship, or maybe it's got to do with murder, or maybe it's got to do with lying, or maybe it's like none of these are compelling. But he's drawing parallels to other instances where this root shows up in the Hebrew Bible. And yeah, I think it's a big puzzle, and I think it's a different puzzle than the one that I wanted to think about in this class. But I think about it a lot. So if you have thoughts, join the class and send me an email.
Randy, go ahead, and then we do need to close up. But again, sign up for his class. I think you'll all enjoy it. So, Randy, go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly, we chant the second Sarah piece in the Rosh Hashanah liturgy. And, I guess I want to think about the long run, because not today. What does the laughing have to do with what we're doing at Rosh Hashanah? I see how the birth and the creation of the new year, the creation of the world aligns with our service. But is there a connection in laughter? I guess the big piece is, why is that passage in the Rosh Hashanah liturgy? And I love it because I've been chanting it every year at the Bima. So
As a way to totally not answer your question, but to give you something else to think about, the Or HaMeir, who is a Hasidic teacher, says that there's a connection between Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot, which is that on Rosh Hashanah we bring down consciousness, we bring down da'at, we bring down something that has to do, I think, with what is opened up by laughter. More on that in the class. And on Sukkot, we physicalize and get to be in it. So there's a sense of it comes down on Rosh Hashanah. The doors are opened then, and we have to do the work on Sukkot. We have to do our laughing on Sukkot, Zman Simchatenu, which is a different word than tzchok, but there's something about laughter and also about joy and consciousness that is the subject of this course.
With that, Chag Sameach, enjoy the rest of Sukkot, and have a good day, rest of the day. Take care. Thank you.
Bye.